In January 2014, I sped to Singapore for 6 months with my husband and two young sons in tow on a Fulbright Distinguished Teacher Grant. I went to explore and learn about Singapore's educational system and how they prepare special education and at-risk learners for college and career readiness. While there is much debate in the U.S. about what those two buzzwords really mean, in light of the dynamic changes of the 21st century and the fact that many of the jobs our students will undertake do not yet exist, these are some surprising jobs by 2030. Robot counselor, simplicity expert, telesurgeon, garbage designer. Well, I went to this educational powerhouse, which is just a small nation state in Southeast Asia, just one-fifth the size of Rhode Island, the smallest state in the U.S., to observe best practices and do some international benchmarking from a special education teacher's perspective on how Singapore is going about preparing their youth for 21st century success. Singapore is a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multilingual society made up of around 5 million people. The major cultural groups are the Chinese, the Malay, and Indian. Singapore is often referred to as Asia Light because it's so multicultural, commerce friendly, and English is the official language of business and school instruction. Singapore indeed is a modern day economic success story. It ranks #1 in the world for city with the best investment potential, #3 in the world for least corruption in the economy, top 3 in the world for foreign trade and investment, and is #1 in the world for math and science instruction. But how did this happen? And in such a short time? Singapore only became independent in 1965, and it was a poor third world country with no natural resources other than its people and strategic geographic location. Well, there are 3 things that I learned about Singapore that explain a lot about their culture and how it impacts their educational system. #1, first, Singaporeans tend to be pragmatic. Some would argue to a fault. This pragmatism, however, aids them in being strategic in their decision-making process. Secondly, Singaporeans like to move in phases. No dramatic shifts here. Systematic and steady wins the race. Thirdly, Singaporeans are constantly seeking to improve and innovate. No sitting back on their laurels for this country. It's part of being kiatsu, or always wanting to be #1 because you're afraid of losing out. A timeline of Singapore's educational stages demonstrate how they have responded pragmatically, systematically, and innovatively to the challenges of a VUCA world. Simply put, their system prepares students for college and career by aligning education and economic policy to respond to shifts in the global economic arena. 1959 through 1978 is known as the survival-driven phase. Right before and after independence in 1965, Singapore was a poor country and many of its citizens were illiterate and unskilled. Only the rich were schooled. This was about to change. In order to survive and address the ills of high unemployment and population growth, the government built many schools and provided just a basic education to its youth. To get out of the economic quagmire, Singapore became an export manufacturing hub. Singapore was able to provide low-skilled labor in exchange for jobs and opportunity. This survival-driven phase is marked by the establishment of a universal primary and secondary education and the creation of a nationwide public school system. Unfortunately, it also is marked by a high dropout rate, poor student performance, and low standards, and a lack of qualified teachers.